Now in this video I'm going to take you on a tour of my vegetable garden right at the beginning of June so you can see the progress I've made since the last video, which I made about 4 weeks ago. Now regulars to the channel will know that I'm based right in the middle of the UK, in the centre of England, and over the last 4 weeks, in the latter weeks of May and the beginning weeks of June, it's been a lot cooler than we normally have. And therefore some of the vegetables are a little bit slower than usual. But as you're going to see as I take you around, there's still plenty of growth and plenty of progress. So as I take you to various parts of my vegetable garden, I'll talk to you about the vegetables that I'm growing, the progress that I'm making, and things that I'm happy with, and things that are maybe a little slower than usual. So we'll start off in the outside spaces, then I'll take you into my potting shed, and then I'll bring you back to this part of the garden, show you some of the progress I'm making with the vegetables I'm growing in containers. So let's get through to the first part of the vegetable garden, which you can see just at the end, which, remember, a few months ago was a hedge that I converted into raised beds. And here you can see, compared to last month, the vegetables have really come on an awful lot. And now all the veg in this area are full of growing vegetables. In this bed over here, we have lettuce and rocket. Over the last few weeks, we've been picking lettuce as we need them, and that's why you can see some gaps in the lettuce. Curly lettuce here, they're Lola Rossa, so I reckon I've got about another half a dozen of those. And the green lettuce, just to their right, are Little Gem. There is on the left hand side some rocket which I've cut and keep coming back to, but I'm going to leave that now for a week or two to get a bit more growth on it. There's also a rocket plant here just in the middle, but they're growing really well. What's not growing so well here, you'll notice that some onions just at the back here. I think that's because these are partially in the shade. So next year I'm going to plant onions in this bed over here, which gets a lot more sunshine. This bed had just been planted in the last video about 4 weeks ago, and as you can see there, I've got some dwarf French beans. These are a variety called Ferrari, and most of those have germinated. And just at the front here, all of my Autumn King carrots have germinated as well. There's 3 rows in there. This bed does particularly well because out of all the beds that I've got in this area, this gets the most sun. And in this bed I've got beetroot, 2 varieties, one called Boltardi, one called Minetta. Most of those have germinated. You can see a few little gaps because these were sown in rows just here. But as you can see, I've multi-sown, so some of those, when they get a little bit larger, I'll just lift gently and place in the gaps. So that's going to give me plenty of beetroot. At the back of there, not doing so well, we have a row of spring onions, but they are coming along, and we are predicted over the next few weeks to have a lot more sunshine there, and that should bring them on quite nicely. Then we come over to this bed here with the green netting on, and in here I have celery and kale. Just lift up the netting and show you what they look like. Now these are doing really well. These are a variety called Octavius F1, which is the celery which I've grown last year and the year before, and they're absolutely fabulous. And at the back of there you might just see behind the kale, which is doing really well. What I am going to have to do with this bed is raise the level of the canes, because kale will grow quite high, as will the celery. So therefore I'm going to need to put larger canes in the corners and put more netting over to give them a bit more space to grow from a height perspective. But as you can see, they're growing particularly well and really, really healthy. One thing about celery is that their origin is as a marsh vegetable. Therefore, they like lots of water. So if you do have celery, you have to make sure you water them really well. And notice the green netting as well. This is scaffold or debris netting, and this is a lot finer than the bird netting I have over here on these beds over here. And the reason for that is it's more for the brassicas really, because in there as well there's one January King cabbage, and with brassicas all of the insects and the birds like to attack them, so you do need some more substantial netting, which is why I've got the debris netting. So that's the 4 beds on the left hand side of my veg plot. Now let's go and have a look on the other side, which in the last video a few weeks ago was completely overgrown. So as we move over to the other side, you'll see a massive difference from the video that I did 4 weeks ago, because this particular area here was completely full of weeds, around about 2 feet high, and it had 2 large conifers in it. And as you can see now, I've spent a lot of time and effort in clearing it, and now it appears to be ready for planting. Now I say appears to be ready for planting because the tendency would be just to fill it up with vegetables. But the problem is that the conifers particularly that were located over in this area, just in front of this fence panel just here, they were fairly well established conifers, and they would have taken an awful lot of moisture and particularly nutrients out of the ground. And if I was to put vegetables straight in, it's unlikely they'd be successful because the nutrients that the vegetables need won't be there at the moment. But the first thing I did was clear the area. Taking the conifers out was a much bigger job than I imagined. As you can see, the roots for the conifers, what appeared to be fairly medium-sized conifers, nothing too large. Caused me an awful lot of work. I had to dig right down, but they did come out eventually, and that allowed me then to clear the ground and clear all the weeds and dig it all over. And the results are pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. It looks pretty good at the moment. But rather than rush in and grow vegetables, which I know a lot just struggle this year because of the lack of nutrients, I think what I'm going to do is start to prepare the ground for the next growing season. So the first stage, as you can see, I sprinkled in all over it some fish blood and bone. There's a lot more than actually on the surface. I've raked it in and watered in, and I'll water it again every couple of days just to put a bit of moisture in there and just to help the fish blood and bone to not really dissolve, but it to release its nutrients into the soil. Then what I plan to do at the end of September, October, is to cover this with manure and leave that over the winter and let the rain and the frost break it all up and take all those lovely nutrients into the soil. And then when I come to the growing season next year, this will be perfect. So the lesson really is to understand your soil. If you really do want good, productive vegetables, you have to make sure that your ground has the nutrients in it. But I am pleased with the progress that I've made in this area compared to 4 weeks ago where this was completely overgrown. So it is starting to look like a vegetable patch finally. So now we're going to go to the back of my garden. It's one of my favourite things this year so far, and that's my potatoes. And as you can see as we go through here, they're absolutely amazing. Here there are two varieties of potatoes. At the front, which are the ones that are slightly smaller but definitely catching up, they're the main crop potatoes called Picasso, and the 6 containers full of those. The ones behind, as you can see with the flowers on them, these are all secondary variety called Charlottes. These were planted on the 18th of March. I checked that before I made the video because I couldn't remember the exact date. And they're looking really healthy. And I'd imagine I'll be able to start harvesting these at the end of July to the beginning of August for the Charlottes. The main crop are going to be later, probably the latter part of September. But I'm going to get a good supply of potatoes, I think. One thing I've learned about growing potatoes in containers is that I need to monitor the watering really closely, because we were away for 3 days, and when I came back the potatoes looked okay, but they were starting to look a little bit like they were wilting. But I watered them, give them a good water, and they soon bounced back. In fact, that prompted me to do a video to show how and when to water potato plants, and that's on the channel, so I'll put a link to that in the video description below, so make sure you check that out in your own time. But these potatoes are looking absolutely fabulous, and I'm really pleased with them. And I will do a video when I harvest the first pot of potatoes to show you how many potatoes I get from each pot. Next, as we walk up my drive, you'll notice on the right hand side there are some containers, and they've got cucumbers, and we'll come to those in a minute. But when we go over to here on the left hand side, we can see the progress of my tomato and pepper plants. So let's start off on the left hand side over here. These 5 tomato plants here are an outdoor variety of tomatoes called Marmande, and they're looking really good, really healthy. If I zoom into the foliage, you can see that it's a really nice lush green colour. And if I come down to the bottom here, you'll see that I've got my water bottles, which I've referred to in previous videos, and that's making a massive difference. So when I water these now, I water into the bottles, and that gets the water directly down to the roots, and that really appears to help with their growth and their health. And in between, I have a combination of chili peppers. This is a variety called DKN. They're growing quite nicely actually. When we get the warmer weather that's promised, chili plants will love that. They should really start to grow quite quickly. This is a variety called jalapeno. Just look at the health of those leaves. Look absolutely fantastic. And that's really just down to them being in a good sunny position and regular watering. This one here is the third variety of peppers. This is a sweet pepper called California Wonder. And as you see the tomato plants, there'll be peppers in between, but all of them are either DKN, jalapeno or California Wonder. If I come onto this one, you can see that it's just starting to set its flowers now. So once they're pollinated, they will become the tomatoes. Marmande is fantastic. I grew them last year. They grow these really large beef tomatoes, and I had to grow them again this year. They were so good last year, and I think that I'm going to get a good crop this year based upon the health of these plants, which I'm really pleased about. So they're going very, very well. And over here we have the other variety of tomatoes. These are a variety called red cherry, and as you can see, they're a lot taller than the Marmande. So if I come around to the first plant over here, this is quite exciting. It's always an exciting time for the vegetable grower. You can just see the first tomato has started to develop. Now as you can see, the plants are coming to near the top of these canes, so I have bought some larger canes which I will start to install over the next week or so, because I'm probably going to let these grow to round about 5.5 to 6 feet before I take the growing tips off, and that's usually the height I grow them at. You do need to control tomato plants, because if you don't, they can get out of hand really quickly, and what you end up growing is a lot of foliage but very few tomatoes. So there are some videos on my channel showing you how to water tomatoes and how to prune and maintain them, so definitely check those out, and I will put the links to those in the video description below as well, so that you can also maximise your harvest. Then we come over to those cucumber plants I was talking about as we walked up the drive. These are an outdoor variety of ridge cucumbers called Market More 76, and as you can see I've got 5 plants growing in buckets on the side fence over here. These were planted outside a couple of days after I did the last video, around about 4 weeks ago. So they're about 4 weeks old now, and cucumbers do take a little time to adjust. They are fairly temperamental, but they're doing okay. As you can see, I've got them growing in the buckets with the same watering system with the water bottles I have for tomatoes, and that allows me to water straight down into the roots. Now, if we start at the top of the plant, you'll see that the growth is really healthy. Lovely green colour, a nice healthy growing tip. And as we come down the plant, you can still see healthy leaves. Now, when we get to the bottom, this is typical of cucumbers. Often the lower leaves do dry out a little and they will die off. That doesn't suggest that your plant is dying at all. A lot of people get concerned about that, but it just seems to be what happens every single year with these cucumbers. They do dry out a lot at the lower levels. I'm more concerned with what's going on top, and if that looks healthy and it looks like it's growing, I haven't got a problem. This has happened every year, and every year I've had a really good crop of cucumbers. So that plant is in really good condition. And if you'll notice as well, I've just tucked in behind the cane there is the start of the first flower. Once that's pollinated, that will be where the cucumbers will form. All these cucumbers are in a similar condition, just as healthy. And I'm really hopeful, as usual, for a really good crop of these. Now, you might wonder why there's 3 canes in each of the buckets, and that's because as the cucumber grows, it starts to throw out side shoots or tendrils, which will need supporting. Some people do grow these and allow them to grow along the ground, but they do take up an awful lot of space, and they are vulnerable to things like slugs and other insects. So I've always trained my cucumbers up canes, and that's why there's 3. So as the tendrils start to grow, I'll start to support them up the canes. Now, I have got a number of vegetables and flowers, in fact, in these mini greenhouses that are going to be ready for planting out really soon. So most of these are flowers. In the top left hand side you can see some coleus, and right next to them, which are going to be planted out, are my petunias. To the right of those, at the back, are a variety of flowers called convolulus and some asters in the front. Then if we get down to the little green trays just over here at the back, I recently planted some more lettuce, so I've got some Lola Rossa. The middle tray is rocket, and then there's a few marigold flowers in the front tray over here. And then to the right of them are some fantastic flowers called Elysium. These are a variety called white carpet, and they'll be ready to go out soon. There's some more coleus in the bottom, which are not doing so well actually in the front tray. And then there's 2 trays next to them, some of my favourite flowers called Mesbuthium. They're almost like little dahlias that open and close, absolutely fabulous. And in the second greenhouse over here, we have at the back, ready to plant out very soon, there are a couple of cauliflowers, and in the front here some basil. And next to them here, I have a tray of sage, which I took cuttings from. They're doing fabulously well. So that's given me 5 new sage plants. I did do 6 cuttings, but 1 didn't survive. 5 out of 6 ain't bad. And next to them, I've been trialling doing some fuchsia cuttings with a fuchsia that I've had for years. And as you can probably see, I've had some mixed success. I reckon I'm probably going to get about 4 or 5 out of that. As it's a plant I already had, I had nothing to lose, so that's going to be some new fabulous plants. This is the second lot of fuchsia cuttings I had. The first ones grew really well, and they're now in my front garden. This is the second lot, and as you can see, there's new growth on these as well. This is another tray of Mesbuthium, just like in the first greenhouse, so I've got plenty of them. Over here, again, another trial. There's a plant in my garden which I didn't know what it was, but produced lovely purple flowers. Did a bit of research and realised it was called periwinkle, so I took some cuttings off that, and they're starting to grow as well. And at the bottom here, we have honeysuckle, again, cuttings from my garden. As you can see, there's new growth on those as well. And 2 trays of rosemary cuttings. So there is plenty going on in the mini greenhouses, mainly flowers, as you can see, but I will, over the next week, be planting some more lettuce and spring onions and some radishes ready to go in for later sowings. As always, I'm always grateful for these mini greenhouses because I lost my large polyhouse that I built on my allotments, but these have provided me with a really good environment for starting and growing seedlings. Now there are one or two other things that I'm growing in the propagators in the potting shed, and we're going to have a look at them next. So now we're inside the potting shed, and there's not a huge amount going on here at this time of year because most of the seedlings now are either in the mini greenhouses outside or have already been planted. But in this propagator here, if I just lift the lid out the way, see I've got 6 trays of seedlings that have recently been planted, so most of them haven't germinated yet. The far left hand corner is a variety of lettuce called Lakeland. Then we've got some spring onions, Ishikura, which is next to them at the back. In the middle left, we've got some zinnias flower seeds, and next to them, there's another variety of spring onions called Elodie. At the front left is a variety of flowers called Abrietta, and then there's some mixed petunias in here just for a later sowing. So most of these were planted a week ago, apart from the 2 at the front, which were planted a couple of weeks ago towards the end of May. And then look at the front propagator here. And this is another experiment. This is clematis cuttings, which I did a few weeks ago. We can always gauge cuttings by the nature of the leaves, and the leaves seem pretty healthy at the moment, so that tells me that they're doing okay. But these will probably take another 3 to 4 weeks before I start to see any growth on these. But I will show you what the clematis will look like when they grow, when we just have a quick look at the top of my garden at the flowers. Now I appreciate this is a veg growing video, but as you know I grow flowers as well. But for those of you who do like flowers, I'll just give you a quick tour of the flowers I've got in my garden. Over here then, we'll start over here, we've got a rhododendron, which I've recently repotted into this barrel here. It was out in our front garden and it wasn't doing very well. The leaves were starting to go yellow, and that's mainly because there was an old tree there and I don't think the roots had the space or the nutrients for its growth. So I repotted it into the barrel, into compost, give it plenty of water, and it's really started to pick up. So really pleased with that. If we come over here, we can see these large sunflowers. These were planted by my 2 wonderful grandsons, and they're growing absolutely fabulously. The growth on them is amazing. Then, as you can see, there's a combination of some lavenders in here, lots of pansies and violas, some more sunflowers over here. These pansies and violas will be replaced very shortly by some of those flowers I've just shown you in the mini greenhouse. But these were planted last October and they give us a wonderful display till now, right to the beginning of June. But they are starting to die back a little bit now, and they'll need replacing. These are those wonderful clematis I told you about. The purple one here is a variety called Nalina, and the one where most of the cuttings from are this absolutely amazing flower here. This is a variety called Josephine, and as you can see I provided a frame for the clematis to grow. That's going really well. Over here we have this absolutely gorgeous red rose here climbing up here, and I will be taking cuttings of this at some point, but I'll probably wait for it to flower completely and then take my cuttings. This is the rosemary plant I took the cuttings off over here, and the vast majority of those fuchsias you can see in the mini greenhouse were taken from this plant here. Not only did I get roughly 30 cuttings from this plant, I've still got the original plant, and that cost me £3, which means I've got so many extra fuchsia plants and it's cost me virtually nothing. Here's some more pansies and violas. There's a thyme plant here. And there are also a few flowers growing in my front garden which I'm building up with the flowers that you saw in the mini greenhouse. Well, I really love growing vegetables and flowers, as you can see, and I've really enjoyed taking you around my garden to show you the progress that I've made since the last 2, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's given you 1 or 2 ideas about things that you can grow and ways to grow them. But don't forget, there are lots of videos on my channel, so if you do need any help or guidance on any particular vegetable or flower or plant, check out the channel just to see if there's anything there that can help you. I'd really love to know how you're getting on your vegetable and flower garden, and if you want to add a comment just below this video just to let me know what you're growing and what's doing well and maybe what's not doing so well, that'd be absolutely fantastic, and it'd be really good for other vegetable and flower growers to share that information. But if you did like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, veg and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. I'll see you all on the next video.